Sun, where she focuses on California climate, air quality, and environmental justice policy. Previously, Katelyn was the Environmental Justice Program Manager at the Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Stockton. Welcome, Katelyn.
Good afternoon. It's really good to be back in Stockton talking to folks. My charge today is to talk about California's cap and trade program. You heard Diz introduce this idea a little bit, so I'm going to talk about specifically what California is doing. Before I get into the details of that, I'm going to take a step back and give you a very quick and very brief sort of history of how we got this cap and trade program. Well, okay, you got the whole list at once. So you may have heard of AB 32, which passed back in 2006. That did a number of things, but is most known for setting this target of reducing our carbon emissions, CO2 equivalent, like Diz was talking about, to 1990 levels by the year 2020. It did a couple other things I'm going to talk about as well, including calling for the creation of a scoping plan and authorizing the creation of a cap and trade program. Then in 2012, SB 535 said, okay, all of this money that we're going to raise from cap and trade, we heard Hal talk a little bit about getting it back as dividends. In California, because of SB 535, a certain percentage of all of those funds raised have to be invested in disadvantaged communities, so environmental justice communities. Right now, it's 35% minimum. And then in 2015 was SB 32, which sort of upped our ambition a little bit and said, all right, we had our 2020 target, now by 2030, we need to get to 40% below those 1990 levels. And then just this past year, AB 398 extended California's cap and trade program. So we had it through 2020, and now we're going to have it at least through 2030. And at the same time, AB 617 created a community air protection program, which has a lot of initiatives in it aimed at improving local air quality. Find the right button there. So like I said, with AB 32, California had to create a climate change scoping plan. And so this is sort of the strategic plan, if you will, of how California is going to meet those targets. So that meeting our 1990 level and then getting below that 1990 level. So it evaluates how we're doing. Are we going to meet those targets or not? It includes a number of different initiatives. Kathryn talked about some of those. I mean, everything from low emission energy to how we manage waste, how water conservation fits in. I mean, this is truly a very comprehensive sort of roadmap of how we are going to reduce emissions and hopefully contribute to averting catastrophic climate change. It also importantly evaluates the health impacts of all of those strategies listed there. So what are we doing as far as avoiding asthma attacks and avoiding premature deaths and avoiding hospitalizations? Maybe I have to be patient, like wait a second. This is a little visual to show you kind of everything, or a snapshot of everything that's involved in the scoping plan. Cap and trade up there at the top, and that's what I'm going to talk about mostly. But all these other aspects of how California addresses climate change is in here too. So super pollutants, that Kathryn was talking about, clean transportation, walkable and bikeable communities. You know, here in Stockton with the San Joaquin Council of Governments, a lot has been done to work towards more sustainable communities. So it's just a sampling. So it covers a lot. And cap and trade is a very important part of this, but it is not the only thing that California is doing to address climate change and our carbon emissions. Some would argue it's not even the most important thing that California is doing. We have a lot that's going on. So I was hoping these would come up one at a time so you weren't like just inundated with all of this, but sorry. So how cap and trade works. As Diz was talking a little bit about, The way a cap and trade or emissions trading system works is the government, in this case the California Air Resources Board, sets a firm limit on the volume of carbon emissions. It is in line with those targets, so it's sort of like, if we're going to meet that target, we can emit this much, and then this much, and then this much, and it goes down every year. And it's sort of like a credit limit on carbon, if you will. It's like, that's the ceiling. And then the California Air Resources Board issues allowances, they're permits essentially, that are equal to 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. That's mostly carbon, but also includes some other greenhouse gases. And then all the regulated entities, or covered entities, or basically the polluters, get these allowances in a couple different ways, and they can buy them if they need them, they sell them if they don't need them, but at the end of the year, or the end of a compliance period, they have to have a single allowance that equals every ton of carbon emissions that they have emitted. And then they turn them in to the Air Resources Board. The Air Resources Board collects all of their emissions data, and a third party verifies it all to make sure everything's reported accurately. And then they start the process all over again. There's a couple different ways. I want to talk a little bit about those allowances. It is mentioned briefly direct allocation or free allocation of allowances. And on paper, that's something that sounds really awful, but California does some of that for what they see as a very good reason. Hal talked a little bit about the concern about businesses leaving California. I think I heard that in your talk, or maybe I'm projecting this into your talk. But so there is this concern of what is called carbon leakage, which basically means that if you are going to make it really expensive for a company to do business in California, they're going to leave California. Some have a higher risk of this happening than others. And when they do that, they take all the jobs with them, and they're just emitting carbon somewhere else. So we haven't made any progress on climate change, and we have people who are unemployed. So in order to make it a little easier for some of those industries that have a really high risk of leaving the state, California Air Resources Board gives them some of their allowances for free. And then they have to buy the rest of them. They can sell their extras, but they get some of them for free. They get a little break so to make sure they stay in California. There are a lot of arguments that they get too many. Industry says they don't get enough, which will surprise you. There's very little evidence that companies have left California because of cap and trade or because of this program. So, largely it seems to be working from what we've seen so far. But that is, you will hear California does give some free allowances, and that's why they do it.
I love technology.
There we go. Okay. So these are a couple other features in the cap and trade program. Organizations like the Environmental Defense Fund that I work for, we call them features because by and large we think it's a pretty good thing. But there are people in California who are just as deeply engaged with these issues who don't see these as good things. So, you make that decision. California allows a very limited use of what are called offsets. So basically, a company can choose to buy or pay into a program that is reducing carbon emissions somewhere else to offset their emissions locally. It's similar to if you've ever noticed when you buy a plane ticket, when you get to the end, it's like, would you like to spend an extra $35 to offset the carbon emissions of this flight? And it's the same idea, just on an industrial scale. One example, albeit probably one of the best examples, the Yurok Indian tribe up in Northern California participates in this program. What they do is they are managing their ancestral land in a way that's very sustainable and maintaining that land as a carbon sink. And so they sell credits into this cap and trade program that a company here in San Joaquin County could purchase to offset a very small percentage of their emissions. The benefits of this for the Yurok tribe is they've been able to raise enough money to purchase back some more of their ancestral land that they had lost over the generations. They aren't all quite as feel-good as this, I have to be honest. Methane is not an exciting project to share details about, but this is certainly one of the good examples of how offsets can work to support an Indian tribe, but also give an alternative way for a company to comply with cap and trade. The program also allows a company to buy allowances and hold on to them. They keep them in the bank, basically. And what those companies are doing is they're betting that the price is lower now than it's going to be down the road. California also has a minimum price in their program, which provides some stability for how much money is raised through the program. It also means that California has one of the higher carbon prices in the world. The minimum is just over $15 a ton, which I know doesn't sound super high, but I want to say the European Union, it's like just over $3 US a ton or something. So this helps keep the price higher, and that minimum goes up every single year. And then, as Dick talked about, California's program is linked to Ontario and Quebec as part of the Western Climate Initiative, which maybe at some point will hopefully have even more participants in it. So I'm going to give you, I would not say this is a real-world example, but hopefully a fun and simplified example, maybe. Oh, yikes. Okay.
I know how you feel.
Do I get any extra time for waiting for this? There we go. Okay, so this is an example, courtesy of my dog. So this is a hypothetical. Let's say Zoe has a tennis ball factory, and last year she emitted 30,000 tons of carbon dioxide. So to comply with the cap and trade program, the California Air Resources Board has decided that there's some risk that Zoe might pick up and move to Nevada and make her tennis balls there. And so the state is going to give her 10,000 permits, basically, 10,000 allowances for part of her obligation. But Zoe also has to upgrade her technology, she has to comply with some of the other programs that California has, and that saves her about 9,000 tons. And then she decides to buy 1,000 tons in that forestry program I was talking about to offset some more. So then she's got 10,000 tons left that she has to make up for. So she goes to auction to buy them. And she has to pay whatever the market rate is, which is a little over $15 minimum in 2018. And then that money is raised through the auctions, funds a lot of different community programs. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Boggs Tract Community Farm in Stockton. They got some funding from Cap and Trade to plant new trees. The buses that Kathryn was talking about, a couple of those in Stockton were paid for with funds from Cap and Trade. And I think just this week, the city was awarded a planning grant to help with long-term climate planning in the city that was paid for through Cap and Trade. So those are the kind of things that the money is doing here locally. And because I'm out of time, I was going to go into the criticisms of cap and trade, but I will answer those questions if you want to hear the other side of why this isn't such a program, perhaps. And if you're curious how it's performing, I will answer those questions in questions.
I wish we had 30 minutes at least for everybody.
It always takes longer than
Our next speaker is Barrigan-Parrilla. She's the executive director and co-founder of Restore the Delta. And her work is centered on helping Californians achieve an accurate understanding of the science and economics that underpin a healthy delta for fisheries, wildlife, and business. Barbara?
Because this is local, I'm not going to go through a long explanation of who we are or what we do. I do think, though, that perhaps some of you are wondering, why are we here then for a talk about climate change and carbon offsets and cap and trade? And it's because there is a real nexus between energy use and water consumption in California. And there are two odd byproducts of the work that we do at Restore the Delta. Yes, we're fighting the tunnels all day, every day, and fighting flows for the estuary. But we have spent an incredible amount of time on the road. I logged 9,000 miles last year. Esperanza-Villalba was here with me, logged 18,000 miles last year. So we interact with lots of groups. In fact, we interact with Sierra all over the state. We get to work with Kathryn, and we get to work with Kyle on a regular basis on state policy. But the truth is, and I'm so grateful that Margot let me squeeze my way into this event, is that we spend more time talking to Sierra Club, Loma Prieta, San Francisco, and Los Angeles than we actually hear from you all locally very often. Because we work with these groups and other environmental groups, we have learned so much about water efficiency. If you go to the Restore the Delta website, we have a sustainable water plan for California. We recognize Wednesday Water Wisdom every week, where we highlight a project about water efficiency in California. So many of the water efficiency projects are tied to good energy consumption, and that's what I'm going to talk about. The second thing that I'm going to plug for us is when we prepared my first round of our testimony for State Water Resources Control Board, okay, we did an extensive amount of research based on the Distressed Communities Fund index, national index, that looks at economic distress and environmental justice. When we wrote that narrative and we presented it to the State Water Resources Control Board, we discovered that Stockton is the number 6 economically stressed city in the United States. Our then attorney, Donna Garcia, who was with Earth Justice, now she is the Environmental Justice Deputy for Cali, PA, took that information from us. She's been in local meetings with us with Mayor Tufts. That narrative from our work is being used aggressively by the city to find funding for other economic programs and environmental programs. So because of the extensive research that we do in a fight, we find other things, and when we take them, we use them. So 2 things before I really hit through this for you to walk away from today. Esperanza-Villalba is still with us. She works with us part-time. She's putting her nonprofit, Kathy Coop, back into play locally. She works a lot with tech and energy entrepreneurs. She's the vice president for the Environmental Justice Advisory Group for the San Joaquin Valley Air District. If you want to know a program that will help people in this large environmental population we have in Stockton, 90,000 people who are part of the environmental justice community, 95% living with some of the worst environmental standards in California. That's a new map show that came out this week for Cali, PA. But to access the programs that are coming out of the cap and trade money, SB knows where the bodies are buried. Let's put it that way. So she needs to become a resource for you. And then the other thing that's going to dovetail on what I'm going to talk about today is how do you connect better energy use with better local water use. And of all the people we work with in the county, I mean, our county, by nature of the fact that we're part of the Delta, is loaded with water experts. But probably our best citizen expert, who isn't doing it from a God-gave system from an economic perspective, but really from an environmental good government perspective, is Jane Wagner-Tyke, who used to work with us and is with the League of Women Voters. So she is another person who is a resource about what should be tracked. And then if you come into this with your energy knowledge, you're concerned about climate change, that's a whole other dimension, and these things need to be linked up, particularly in San Joaquin County. So now I've probably used all my time. So let me, I absolutely love using this slide. I'm not talking about the tunnels today, other than to say I think we're going to win. Year to 2 years of work, but I ultimately think we're going to win. Whether the tunnels get built or not, the Sacramento San Joaquin River watershed, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, is going to see a decrease in its runoff by about 40%, 38 to 40% over the next 35 years. That's significant. It has significant impacts on groundwater recharge. That has significant impacts on how we use water locally. So whether the tunnels get built or not, that's the future of what we're looking at. We don't want to be Cape Town. We don't want to end up in California counting down the days till we run out of water. So the one last thing I'm going to say about the tunnels project, actually, let me flip back that, is, especially in terms of talking about offsets in cap and trade, the EIR basically explains that the project would be the equivalent of 600,000 new cars on the road per year of construction in California, with a construction time frame starting at 14 years. The plan is to buy carbon offsets in other places in California. So if my great enthusiasm and arrogance is wrong, okay, say everything goes wrong in the next year and a half, I kind of doubt it. My argument is that if this is a region that's going to be sacrificed, then there should be a push from people locally that all those, a good chunk of those offsets coming back here. And that doesn't mean taking farms and making them into carbon sinks. There's no plan for that with the tunnels. It really means making our Delta cities as efficient as possible and making our water use and our energy use and our sustainability, I think, as good as possible, especially when we consider where we are in terms of this huge environmental justice community. Stop it. 20% of our electric use in California is actually tied to moving water. About 8 or 9% of our electric use in California is tied to the pumps with the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. The pumps at Tracy, the canals, moving that water all the way down the state and then into Southern California. And then, so the other half of that 20% is moving water around locally, whether it's through our municipal water districts, agricultural pumping. If you just put into Google water energy nexus, you'll find some great papers on this that pop right up out of Stanford. And they have good bibliographies on them, so you can find secondary sources for a lot of this material. So I would suggest those are really good resources. The reason why I put this map is to remind people, if you have so much water in one part of the state and you have less water in another part of the state, you have to think about how do you minimize moving that water, but get water to where it needs to be, or create water where it can be created, or save water and reuse water, and do it in really energy efficient ways. And I include this slide just to remind you that decrease in flows isn't just going to have an impact on us locally, it's going to be a significant impact for the entire estuary. People forget that the Delta is part of the San Francisco Bay Delta estuary, the largest estuary on the west coast of the Americas. It supports fisheries from Monterey all the way to southern Washington. 80% of the water that we do take out of the Delta goes for industrial agriculture through the San Joaquin Valley. There are questions about how and where that water should be applied, but water efficiency in agriculture is just as important as urban, and that's because of the developed water we have in California, not water that's left for the environment. About 80% is used by agriculture. So what is that water energy nexus in California? In addition to implementing climate change programs through cap and trade legislation, the 20 by 2020 water use reduction legislation that was part of the Delta Reform Act in 2009 actually has as one of their main goals to reduce energy use as related to water use. Okay? This is really interesting. People say, well, don't we create energy out of our hydro dams? And what's really funny is that not only are they bad for fish, but the energy that we get in California out of our hydro dams is the exact same amount we spend in energy moving water around. So it's a wash, we don't gain anything. So we have a lot of work we do in the urban sense, and I think from good Sierra Club members, there's advocacy you can even do locally with agriculture. This is basically what you would call the loop for the water use system in an urban area. Your water comes from a source, you create it, a supply, you treat the water, you distribute it, you end up end use, and you either end up with wastewater treatment or recycling, and from either system you can have discharge. I just want to put this up for people to start thinking about where are the opportunities to move to solar energy, to move this water around, clean this water up, store it, recycle it, and reuse it. We were working with people in Los Angeles this last year, and they came up with a great program. They were running a bond through their county, Los Angeles County, to create stormwater capture and management programs for all of the school district property, because that's such a huge school district. And because of that, Esperanza and I are working again with the County Office of Education for the 3rd annual H2O Hackathon, which will happen on March 17th. And our challenge for the students this year is how can you reduce water use in your school by 20%? And included in that is the idea of moving that water around, capturing it, reusing it, storing it, cleaning it, or using less in energy efficient ways. So we have opportunities in Stockton. We have a very old municipal water treatment system that's going to need to be built. We have a water intake plant. If we are to look at trying to push for resolutions for zero emissions from the city, I think we should really be pushing for those municipal services to become as energy efficient as possible. I put solar systems up, of course, that could be through purchasing the best renewable sources of energy as possible. Irrigation systems, wastewater management. How do we move that water? What kind of pumping does it require? Where are the opportunities to turn all of that into solar power or wind power driven systems? Water recreation. This one kind of ties back to swimming pool systems in parks. You want to have green space in parks and schools. How can you capture and reuse that water? How can you monitor for moisture in the soil? And how can you create those systems with technology that really is zero emissions and that gets you off of using electricity? I think what's really important is really this move towards agricultural irrigation pumping to try to create a market where we can, whether it's through credits, if it's working with the county to create incentives for our ag programs to get people switched and make it affordable for farmers, get them switched to solar pumping with water. Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, hey, I'm almost there. Great. So here's just a list. Kathryn had her list. I think these are really doable things for people when they're advocating and monitoring government programs, water use programs, water district efficiencies that you all can be advocating for. One last word, I really want to clue people into Sierra Club about. I also have this horrible task in my job where I read loads of urban management water plans in California. Boy, you want to go to sleep at night. One of the things happened since the legislation was passed in 2010 is that we have contractors who go in and write urban management water plans for the cities. And I'm just disgusted because I'm reading the same boilerplate language from city to city to city with some variations in numbers, okay? I had alerted a couple people locally with Sierra Club that the biggest problem I'm seeing is that general plans are not matching up with urban management water plans in California. We have the same problem here. So, Kathryn gave you her list. It is not an issue we have had time or capacity to take on at Restore Delta, and because we do have to finish this battle, we probably won't for the next 18 months, But we are really happy to give you resources and review plans with you and point you into the right direction to start thinking about all these things. We can point you to other groups that are doing these things successfully throughout the state. So if people want to take up this work, we are available to coach you. We'll do sessions, we'll teach people, we'll point you towards resources, but we can't lead it. So I'm hoping today that we're going to recruit some people who really want to work on that water energy nexus locally. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, we are at the time in our program today to take questions from all of you. And I know that you've got lots of them. I have as well. What I'm going to suggest, we had planned on wrapping this up, this part at 2:30, and then give people an opportunity to kind of talk to the panelists and do some networking together with all of you. I'm going to suggest that we take about 20 to 30 minutes actually for Q&A, assuming that you all have questions. And that'll give you the panelists an opportunity to share more from their perspective as well. And then we'll kind of limit the amount of networking time at the end. Does that sound like it works okay for y'all?
Or we can be here a little longer after 3 o'clock. That's good.
Yeah, people can stay longer if you choose to, that's fine. Hal, why don't you come on up here and grab your seat. We're going to keep this sort of informal. We're not going to have mics for the presenters. I don't think they need to come up to the mic to speak. You might think about standing up so your voice projects. If somebody has difficulty hearing, raise your hand and we can change that. We'll see how it goes. And when you stand up to ask your question, if you will project your voice so that everyone can hear, and I can repeat questions if there's difficulty from folks in the audience.
I had a question.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I think that's the game plan if everybody's comfortable with that. And again, I'd like to keep this more of a discussion and a little bit less formal than sometimes these sessions are. I think that gets people kind of thinking about what they're curious about as well. So, would you like to start with questions, sir?
Yeah.
Why don't you stand up and then you can kind of project your voice a little bit.
Yeah, I like to address that. So I think that we have a lot of discussions about new markets and trade markets and things like that, and that's a whole bunch of economics that is good in some respects, but maybe so complex and so difficult to regulate and understand. And really, we need to look at the private sector for a lot of the resources that I think we're going to be needing in the near future, like desalinization plants, and maybe some of the technologies that's going to have to come from the private sector and from them actually producing the product for us to consume as consumers and buy. And I really think that that's the real thing, instead of trying to like create a socialization system like that's more like socialistic in nature, where we turn around and we actually give dividends back to the public. That's fine. And we have a system like Social Security that works, but it necessarily doesn't always go just. Not everybody fairly is equally given the right information and the right amount of money, and
Okay.
even when we do give money, it doesn't always fit as well. Thank you.
Would you like to take that comment about getting more private investment in solutions?
Let me start. I think it's a pretty sophisticated insight. What the experience we have in the energy field is the basic research that's required to develop new
Hal, you
technology.
want to stand up and
Sure. The basic research that's required to develop these new technologies that are going to turn the tide for us. Private interests do not engage in that level of research. What they want to do is see that level of research funded by government. And then once that basic research is done, private enterprise is more than willing to come in and take that basic research, commercialize that basic research, and move it to general applicability. One of the things that was particularly poignant was when Bill Gates went to testify in front of Congress, and he said essentially, the budget we have for research, for technology to deal with climate change is really very, very inadequate. It's $5 billion. His recommendation was that be $15 billion. And what he said, and the reason he said is, the new research at the basic level is not going to be done by people like me. But people like me and people I know are gonna take that research and commercialize. So that's the way I think it's gonna happen.
I think the other thing I would add to what Hal said is, sorry. One of the benefits, if you want to think about it as a way of using a market type mechanism, is the government is not picking the winner, so to speak. So we're not saying that, you know, every glass company has to install like this particular thing that they may or may not like in their production process. Instead of saying, you need to just clean up your act to this level, and it allows innovation to happen, and it allows the private sector to figure out how are they going to meet that target without saying you have to do X, Y, and Z. Now we have a lot of those direct regulations too that say you have to do this, but that's where the market can allow the private sector, like you're saying, to sort of decide what makes best sense for their business model to also meet the target that they have to meet.
The market isn't there to clean up the environment. It's not there for a lot of the things that we care about. It's there often for the exchange of money and for people to make money and companies to make money. So in order to get those things that we care about incorporated into the market, you need the market to be regulated. And that's why you'll have something like the Air Resources Board saying to the auto industries, you have to make zero-emission vehicles. Now, whether you get electric, whether you get a hydrogen fuel cell, that's where it's up to the innovator, the companies to decide. But if we don't have somebody regulating the market, we will never have the kind of innovation we need to get to the values that we have that the market doesn't naturally have.
Yes, I think we wanted to say something about
I just wanted to reassure you that the research and echoing what Hal especially said is that, for example, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab has a program called Cyclotron Road, which takes their cutting edge stuff and they have a bid essentially from people that want to develop that. They're all private. And so they will work directly with the researchers to understand how to best commercialize it, but it's done privately. So it continues to foster that kind of growth, and it's entirely private.
And just so tying back to what we're looking at, which could potentially happen with the Delta, not so much the market, but if you have large government infrastructure projects, I would say with offsets, and which I know these groups are wonderful about doing, is you have to have a backup set of policies so that poor people aren't the people left experiencing the pollution while somebody else gets the money. And so I consider us really lucky because we work with great people in California who get that and who understand that that has to be built into how you go about that management. The reason why I keep mentioning what we possibly experience here is because it's buried in small print in a 40,000-page document. So I'm trying to push this idea forward.
Thank you. Yes.
So, kind of connecting this sort of idea of complexity and whatnot, sometimes sort of the efforts to control environmental issue in one area can have sort of unintended spillover effects. It kind of sounds like the California cap and trade has learned from some of the issues that other, well, I don't know if I came with it first or something, about like it's like having the price floors so that it doesn't collapse and things like that. But you can also think like, well, as oil prices have dropped, oil companies, instead of producing less, have moved into making plastics and stuff like that. I was wondering if you could talk about some of the efforts that have gone into, while promoting some of these approaches to cutting carbon emissions, avoiding some of those undesirable side effects.
I think that's an excellent point. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Yes. Even better. I think you're right, and that actually unintended consequences is one of the criticisms of a cap and trade type program. I mean, you are correct that California has taken other models and perfected it in a lot of ways, but one of the ways a cap and trades type system works is that you're looking at the statewide emissions, and you're only looking at greenhouse gas emissions. So you're not necessarily looking at local air pollution, which is a huge issue, and so we need to address that with other tools, but you don't want cap and trade to make your local air pollution worse. And there are some people that think that happens, there are other people that argue it doesn't work that way. So, I can't, I'm not going to definitively say one or the other because I don't know. Another issue though is if emissions are going down overall, which is great for the atmosphere, it is possible that you could have emissions in one specific spot that are actually going up, as long as overall statewide they're going down. And as you can imagine, that can create unintended consequences. And California is trying very hard to figure out how to mitigate for all of these unintended consequences. We haven't totally figured it out yet. I think the state is constantly trying to address these issues, but it's not perfect, certainly. And I think that is a constant challenge, is predicting the unintended consequences and mitigating for them at the same time.
Just to add to that we don't know what unintended consequences are or are going to be. So we just have to be nimble and address them when we figure them out. And not to worry and get it perfect right now, because we don't know what perfect is. So pretending we're omniscient is kind of not the appropriate way to go. So move ahead, correct as you go.
I'm just going to add one other thing that Kathlyn's comment made me think of. I was on a call the other day with one of our program directors in Southern California, who was pointing out that despite the fact that in California our emissions are going down, we've made progress. They're having more bad air quality days in Southern California because of heat. It's just getting hotter. So we have to make progress faster than we ever thought we did in the past. So I'll go right here.
I guess continuing the same theme, I was one of the people who raised their hand when they said, who's driving an electric car? Actually, it's both electric and gas. It's a V-Volt, okay, which for my use is really, really great. But I wonder, I plug the car in every night and charge it up. I have a PG&E time of use plan, so the electricity is really cheap. But I keep wondering, what are the environmental costs of, say, making the battery that's used in the car, harvesting kinds of minerals that haven't been used in the past on a large scale, the lithium and all this stuff. And then what happens to those batteries, when they, reach their useful life expectancy? How do you get rid of it? How do you recycle it? And the electricity that's coming out of that charger comes from PG&E. How do they produce electricity? Is it clean? Is it dirty? So what's the overall cost and impact of using a battery-operated car? Is it good or bad on the whole?
Somebody actually asked me at the break the same question. Unfortunately, I was in a workshop the other day where one of the engineers from an NGO was talking about that issue. So I actually have an answer, whereas normally I just have to stand up here and fumble. Some of the automakers already have programs where they're going to recycle the batteries. Others don't. And one of the things that has to be addressed is what do we do to make sure as we get enough of those vehicles on the road that they actually exceed their life, there's enough of them, there's a volume of them. How do we make sure that there is a take-back program at all of the automakers so that they are recycling, or that there is a program to ensure that all those materials are recycled? The metals that are used, the really precious metals that are not used normally, it's a very small quantity in each of those batteries, and most of them could be and can be captured and reused later. But what's interesting is that they've done an analysis at CARB for wells to wheels. They do that all the time and take into account a lot of stuff. And it still ends up being, especially in California where we have a very green grid that is getting greener, it still comes out being better for the environment. And then finally, one of the issues that this engineer brought up the other day that I had not thought about is, it's interesting when people talk about conventional vehicles, they never ask, what's going to happen to all that stuff in the engine? Because there's a lot of stuff in that engine, a lot of metals, and a lot of stuff that could be recycled. And, over time, some of that is getting recycled, but it's not an issue that people automatically raise when they think about a conventional vehicle. So, the bottom line is in an ideal world, we'd probably all be walking, but it's not going to happen that way. So if we have to use mobility, how do we use the cleanest mobility? And right now, electric vehicles in California, thank goodness we don't have a grid that's 100% coal-driven, thanks to the Sierra Club. We have a clean grid that's getting cleaner, and it still is, it's a benefit to the environment here.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is the money from cap and trade being used for rebates for like electric cars, or putting in electric stations, like ground that stop charging? Yeah, no place for you to charge them if you come from out of town. And I have another question. Thank you.
Yes. So as Diz started mentioning in her presentation, there are a lot of different things that the money from cap and trade goes to, as long as a certain percentage of it goes back to disadvantaged communities. But it does include programs that give rebates for the purchase of electric vehicles. Some of it helps fund the vehicle take-back program they have in the valley through the Air District, where if you have a really old polluting car, you can turn it in and get money towards purchase of a newer used car that's cleaner. Charging stations, I don't know off the top of my head, and I think Kathryn probably does though. If you grab one of the EDF papers I have floating around, on the back there's a little chart that sort of gives an overview of how much money has gone to different types of programs, so you sort of get a sense of where these billions of dollars are going in the state.
The governor just made an announcement right after his state. He mentioned it in the State of the State, and he released some more documents for the budget after the State of the State, where he's increasing the amount of money that's going to go from the cap and trade program this year, and he has signed an executive order for the future to send a signal to the next governor about more money going to electric vehicle rebates, with a specific and large portion going to disadvantaged communities, and also more to infrastructure, charging stations. However, there is some extra good news. You know when VW cheated the state? Well, they got a really big fine. And part of what their requirement is to do in California, they have to do some stuff in every state, but what they have to do in California is putting tons and tons of money, I can't remember exactly the amount off the top of my head right now, but tons of money over a period of years to put in new electric charging stations around. So we're going to see that, especially in the Sacramento area, in the Fresno area, in the LA area. Finally, there was a bill, SB 350, that was passed a few years ago. And one of the interesting things that the oil industry hated that bill because it said that we reduce our use of oil in the transportation system. They actually had to take that part of the bill out. But what they put in instead is a part of the law now says that utilities are allowed to go out and own and put in charging stations. So the utilities are motivated to become competitors with the oil industry to provide fueling for vehicles. And there are proceedings going on and plans going on. So you're going to see a lot more because PG&E and San Diego Gas and Electric and California Edison all see an economic value in putting these charging stations in. So we're at the beginning of a boom era for getting those chargers.
And hopefully more of the really high-speed, fast chargers. So that's what we need more of.
Yes.
Yes?
My question had to do with what you were saying, sir, is that if I understand correctly, you're talking about putting a fee on energy producers, carbon energy producers, and eventually the marketplace will make good energy cheaper than this, carbon energy that has a fee on it, and that's what you're working on in Washington. Where are we with that now? How could that possibly ever happen with the administration we have now?
That's a fair question. I didn't get to, in my initial presentation, get to finish our experience with the Republican offices that we built. What we found sharply when we went to the Republican offices is their attitude toward any of these kind of proposals is that they're just a Trojan horse for getting more money into government, for expanding the size of government, for increasing bureaucracies, and for increasing regulatory schemes, which they find philosophically anathema. And on top of all that, they believe all these schemes have the potential for creating jobs and the economy. So one of the things that we have done over the course of the last 5 years is to try to address every one of those concerns. In the particular approach that we use and why we think the dividend is so important is what we are saying to Republicans. When you have the dividend, that makes all of this revenue neutral. You're not putting more money into government. You're not growing the size of government. You're not increasing the size of bureaucracies. And our approach, we believe, is based on the value of the free market as the most efficient way of getting to all these goals that we're talking about, as opposed to having a complex regulatory scheme. To support all of that, we cited a study by an organization called Roedner. And what that organization is, it's an economic modeling organization that both Republicans and Democrats respect. And what they did is they modeled a carbon fee and dividend program. And what they found is, amongst other things, not only do we reduce greenhouse gas very expensive, but what we also do is we actually create more jobs than would otherwise exist without our effort. We actually increase the amount of GDP that will exist in our economy that would otherwise exist. All of this information is part of what I told you that has led these offices to start shifting in their attitude. Instead of being reflexively hostile to any efforts to deal with climate change, they're now more recognizing something's going to have to happen at some point, and they're trying to wrap their heads around how it could work consistent with their principles.
Thanks, Hal. We have time for one more question. I'll take it right here.
I just wanted to say I really like the model that Citizens Climate Lobby uses because it's actually citizens who are lobbying for these changes, and I think it's really important for us to do that lobbying in our local communities, get involved with our party, no matter what party we belong to, and to make sure that those we vote in are going to reflect the values that we see and needs that we see in the future.
So it's a comment. Okay.
I just wanted to piggyback on the answer and question that she had of charging stations. So for businesses, the grant is available through the district for the businesses. And so then if people want to apply for that, they can go to San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, and there's a grant, so they put that in their businesses. Not for the home, but for business, there are grants available now. Thank you.
So one more question. Yes. Oh, did you want to go ahead?
I wanted to follow up on your comment. There is a change in the tide, as it were, and you're not seeing it with the current administration, but you are seeing it with some Republicans. The Citizen Climate Lobby, as you said, deserves a huge amount of credit for their Climate Solutions Caucus. In order to join it, you have to have a Republican and a Democrat. So it's exactly even. And they are working together. There needs to be a time for everybody to work together and come up with a solution, not just, oh, this is the right answer, oh, that's the right answer. Work it together so that they own it. The other thing is that, I can't remember the name of it now, but Schultz, Climate Leadership Council, proposed to Trump when he first became president, something somewhat similar to the CCL proposal. And those are all, they're economists and very noteworthy Republicans. So there is a change in the timing. We are seeing a change. And the Republicans in California, in their strategy sessions to recover the losing votes that they have, are embracing climate change as one of the changes. So there's a new Republican, something or other, I can't remember what it was called, but that is aware of the urgency of climate change and that we need to do something about it and want to be part of the discussion on the positive side. So there's a lot of, it's a time of hope and change, I think.
New Way, California.
Thank you. Okay, last question.
Hi, my name is Valeria Savia. I'm with the Center for Climate Protection, and we are beginning our work again after a short hiatus here in the Central Valley in San Joaquin, Stockton area, as well as Fresno. And we are advocating for what is called a community choice energy. Maybe you've heard of it, those of you who work throughout the state and across in Washington. So I am here trying to connect with folks like all of you and trying to build some support and some thoughts, because this organization would take what is now the profit from organizations like PG and turn it into capital that the municipal or city or county can use. So any knowledge that you can impart my way, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I just want to wrap up quickly, and this was, I think, a really informational opportunity for all of you. I hope that you will take what you learned today and go out into your neighborhood, social groups, your community, and share what you've learned. Encourage others to take time to learn about climate change, the solutions that are available today. We have to move faster, and it's only going to happen with all of us working together. I want to thank our panelists today for taking time on this beautiful Saturday for showing up. And others who have contributed to this great day. Margot, I think you had a couple of message things that you wanted to say quickly.
I'd just like to say thank you to our entire panel. It was truly wonderful, surpassed any expectations I had.
You had low expectations.
I didn't know when I reached out. And have a little token of our appreciation for everybody here, as well as for our wonderful moderator, Kate Luby. Thank you so much. And she's wonderful. We have a lovely Saturday. It's quite a challenge, quite a chunk of the Saturday. So I would like to also mention, our tables, we have the League of Women Voters. Please everybody stop by there. They are dynamic in our area. We have a Sierra Club over here in front of the fireplace. And I appreciate Kathryn's comments about the Ready for 100 because it is something we're looking at. In the lobby, we have Citizens Climate Lobby right next to the registration table on this wall. We have Restore the Delta on this wall. And right outside the door, we have a new group, the San Joaquin County Climate Action Coalition. So that is, our rollout will be Earth Day, just so you know, we're not rolled out yet. It's still a happening thing. But feel free to sign on if it's something you're interested in. This is a group of local people from our various environmental groups, and I'm talking about various, who are looking to really work on concrete, actual projects that we'll be looking at in the city. Things like planting trees and things like anti-idling issues. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone, and thank you very much Kate. Kate was our moderator for today, and